Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 10th Claris Community Live. It's my pleasure today to introduce Marc Larochelle from Productive Computing, and he's going to give us the building blocks of using JSON in FileMaker. I know this is one of those things, and I think I have admitted in a few posts that I can use JSON, but I always have to look up the functions and everything whenever I do use it. So I'm looking forward to his introduction. And Marc, why don't you introduce yourself while I get the poll up and running?
Sure. Thanks, Rosemary. Great to be here on this webinar series. And the 10th one, hey, that's a milestone. That's great. I've been watching, I think I've seen every one of them so far. And it's wonderful to have people in the community share their knowledge and talent. And so we appreciate Claris for doing that. I'm Marc Larochelle from Productive Computing. We are a company, a platinum firm. We started way back in 1996. I've been personally working with FileMaker since 1991. So that's 33 years now in the making. I started with, I think it was FileMaker 2. The very first project I did, I had to do a sub-summary of a giant directory. I was an intern at the National Association of Music Merchants, and I remember it like it was yesterday. They just handed me 2 disks. Here's your computer, here's a project, go for it. And that's the only training I got. And it's just a testament to show how easy FileMaker can be to get started. And here we are, fast forward to 2024. And now FileMaker is all of that and a ton more. And that brings us to this interesting topic called JSON, which is all about text formatting. And it's a conduit into the world of integration. So excited to be here.
Yes, thanks, Marc. And I actually was also introduced to FileMaker in college, if people haven't heard that. I was working in the student employment office, and we had someone else on the staff had built a FileMaker app that we used to post job listings and print them out on little cards that got stuck to bulletin boards. And then people came in and browsed the job listings. So to get started, we've just activated a poll in Slido within WebEx. So if you click in the lower right, there's like 3 squares and a plus sign that's apps. And you should be able to open that up and choose Slido and answer the 2 questions. So first question is, do you currently use JSON in your FileMaker apps? And the second question is, how comfortable are you using JSON? And it looks like people are finding those results, and you can just like pop them open and see what people are saying. So Marc, while we let people do the poll, why don't you
Sure.
start by just tell us a little bit, what is JSON?
Sure. And I have a presentation here too with half a dozen slides that we'll go through talking about JSON. And if you recall, when we announced this, we also had a mention of APIs. And APIs are, in a sense, directly correlated with JSON because JSON is the language of communication between APIs or apps and APIs. So, but JSON is really, and I'll say this again here in a few minutes, JSON is a text format. It's often confused. People think of it as, oh, isn't that a computer language? But it's actually a text format, a lot like CSV files or XML. It's just a format, and it's a really flexible format, which you'll see here in a second. So, excuse me, what I'll do is I'll just show some slides here and walk you through that process, and then we'll go into a demo with Rosemary. So let me share my screen and do that.
Yeah, and I'll just like pop in here. It looks like we're about 2/3 of the audience currently uses JSON in their apps. And comfort is pretty much right. Most people are landing where I am. I use JSON rarely, but need to look it up. That's about 37%, and tied at 21% are other options of using it every day, using it when needed for integrations, and Jay what? So I think we have a good mix of skills. So I will invite you all to ask questions in the chat, please. And I think as Angie said at the top, feel free if there are questions in chat and you know the answer and you're an expert, just pop in and answer them. And we'll also bring those questions into the conversation as we go.
Yes, absolutely. We can handle that on the fly. So before we talk about JSON, I think we want to spend just a few minutes talking about APIs, what they are, and how this all relates, because JSON by itself isn't necessarily useful, but in the context of working with APIs, it becomes vital. So when we talk, and this is assuming that you're brand new to the world of APIs, I know a lot of people who are expert developers who really haven't done much work with APIs, if any. And this is all about crossing that line, taking your regular standard FileMaker skills and going to that next level, because there's just so much out there, and that is the future. So API stand for Application Programming Interface. It's really a fancy term that just means it's a standard that allows two applications to communicate to each other, whether it be a web app talking to a database backend or a FileMaker app talking to an API that represents data. And APIs are everywhere because they are the way to integrate one thing to another. So accounting, payment processing, there's APIs for e-commerce, email and text communications, analytics, reporting, file storage, marketing, social media. And then there's this whole other world of data manipulation. And that's where we talk about AI integration, translation, transcribing audio, summarizing data. All of that is at your fingertips once you understand how to work with APIs, once you understand JSON. All of this becomes immediately available, and it's already built in, baked into FileMaker. You're just really clicks away from all this. So how it works in a nutshell is you have your app, and then you have the provider data. So you might say to yourself, well, why do we need APIs? What's the whole concept of it? So imagine this repository of data. Let's just say it's a government database or a database containing zip codes or a system that manages weather and analyzes all of that. You need some way to communicate to those giant repositories. You need it to be safe, you need it to be secure, and you need it to be standardized. So that's where the API comes in. It's a layer of integration that allows any app to talk a certain language, and that becomes your middleman in a sense, or your middlewoman. So your app will talk to the API first, then the API talks to the data. Then you get a response from that data interpreted through the API and back to your app. So that is what we're talking about here. That's the magic of APIs. Now, Claris Connect is another product on the Claris platform, and that can also act as a conduit between your app and a given API. So it allows you to have a lot more flexibility, and there's a lot of advantages to Claris Connect. For the context of this presentation, we're assuming that our app is talking directly to an API out in the marketplace. So big advantages of APIs, it facilitates integration. So if you have a way to talk easily to a data repository, it makes things easy, which then increases efficiency for the whole organization. You can do things you couldn't do before. And when you give people access to data that they have, that they didn't have before, you really encourage innovation and enthusiasm for either your app or for a project or for questions that you've always had that you didn't get a good answer to. So there's just so many advantages. So the world of APIs today use JSON, which is JavaScript Object Notation. That's what it officially stands for. And like I mentioned earlier, it is a text construct. It's just a way to format text. And it's a universal standard for data exchange. It is today's standard. Now, people have used CSV in the past. That's still a thing. It's still the easiest way to move data in a flat file. But when it comes to APIs, let's see, let me just give you an example. For the last 3 weeks, I've rebuilt our course for API fundamentals, and every single one of those APIs used JSON as the language. None of them used CSV. So it's just an example of how popular and how standardized it has become. So it's a text format, not a programming language. I already mentioned that. So here's huge things about JSON. It's human readable. You're able to look at a bunch of JSON, and it's very easy to read because you can see, in a sense, the field names and the data. It's also machine readable, which is obviously required for machines to read it. And it's very flexible. You can store multiple tables in a single file, which is something very difficult, if not impossible, to do with other constructs such as CSV. So speaking of that, let's take what we all know as a traditional CSV export from FileMaker into Excel. Works great for a single table. I have a list of contacts. I want to export those, use it in Excel. Same in reverse. I have a flat file of contacts in Excel and I want to bring those into FileMaker. That's no problem. That's still a thing and we'll still be using that. But now, complex systems like our apps that we build often have relationships and often have entities. So we have a company and additional contacts. So here on the right, you see a typical example of a JSON formatted text block. And here is the company. And here are the additional contacts. And they're side by side like that, or on top of each other. So it's both human readable. I can see that the company name is Doe Enterprises. I can see that the first name of the additional contact is Jane. I see that the second name of the additional contact, or the second contact, is John. Very easy to see. The computer understands it. We humans understand it. And it really just makes sense. So imagine having a single file representing all of these different tables and relationships. So what you're looking at here is a very basic JSON object. And I'll just quickly explain it. The object itself starts with a curly brace on the left, and it ends in a curly brace on the right. The first part of that, in quotes, is the key. And that's the word message. And then after the colon, we have hello world, also in quotes, and that would be the value. So this is known as a key value pair. The entire entity is known as an object. And this is as tight as you can make it. In other words, you don't see any spaces there whatsoever. You don't see any carriage returns. And the only space you see is between the comma and the word world because it's hello world. But oftentimes we format JSON so that it's more human readable. So it's very common to see an introduction to a carriage return where needed and a space after the colon as an example. So it's very forgiving in that way. You can put carriage returns and spaces and format it however you want outside the string and outside the key. So that's what makes it flexible. You can't do that sort of thing with other formats. So that's a JSON object. And here's what an object looks like when it has a beginning key of contact. And then within that, you see we have another curly brace here, introducing other keys, first name, last name, email, phone, city, and state, along with their values. So you could say that this is the first key or the root key, and then we have additional entities or elements within that, each of them their own key and key value pairs. So that's what that looks like. Then the other concept of JSON, because really there's only two concepts, objects and arrays. Then we have the array. That's the notion of multiple items in a single block, if you will. What you see here is actually valid JSON, although you would never, typically don't see it formatted this way. But it's simply a left straight bracket and a right straight bracket and in between commas. That second example is the same thing, but with text strings. With a string, you just need to put quotes. And like I said, you don't typically see an array just hanging out by itself, although you do sometimes see that from certain APIs. This third example here is what you would typically see. You would see some sort of key identifying the values. So here, my key is most used apps, and then the values for that would be FileMaker, ChatGPT, and Keynote. And those are encapsulated within those straight brackets. So that's a key in an array, or you could say, and the whole thing is an object.
So just to like translate that back to FileMaker,
Right.
is that kind of like a repeating field?
Yeah, it's kind of like a repeating field. Or you could almost think of it, yeah, it's kind of like a repeating field. I think that's probably the best way to say that. And going back quickly to that other example where I had this here, you can think of the contact as being the table. And you can think of first, last, email, phone, city, and state as the fields. And of course, Alice, Johnson, New York, and New York, those would be the data, also known as the values. So yeah, I often think of JSON and put it into FileMaker terms, so it makes it easier to comprehend. So good point, Rosemary. That was a good example.
Oh, and Beverly just added, or it could be a related field with number of values being flexible.
Correct. And what you'll see here in a second, I'll show it on the next slide after this one. But here's an example where we take that example before where we had, let's say, the table and the fields. Then notice I have a comma here, and this is another key with an array. So this is where it becomes infinitely powerful and flexible because you can mix and match and nest things to your heart's content. So here I have, in a sense, a record from the table contacts followed by another. This could be another table. This could be another field with values, like you said, repeating fields. So how these things relate to each other and the way they're nested means something. And once you get to understand how it looks and how it works, it becomes actually very simple and straightforward and something you can really rely on. This here is another example of a way to construct it. In this situation, we have students, and this is more to what Beverly was talking about, where you might have an object within an array. So here's the students table, if you will, and then here's my array, and then I have 3 new objects. It's not just a simple value of Alice, Bob, and Charlie. It's an object, surrounded by these curly braces, name, Alice, age 23. So what I have here is 2 fields, all within the array. So again, that's what Beverly was talking about. In her example, if this was a related database, then you would have ID 1, 2, 3, name, Bob, name. So each one would have an ID, and that would then correlate that those records are directly related to another ID somewhere else in the system. So that's how that works. Any other questions on that? We'll just continue here. We're just about done.
I think someone just said that that's a great example. And I just want to acknowledge a question that we are not equipped to answer. That's there's a little bit of a conversation in chat about speed and performance of importing JSON. So what I promise to do is I will take that back to the product managers and engineering teams, and we'll answer it in the Claris community in the next week or so. Yeah, we just don't have anyone here who can give an intelligent answer. So I would rather make sure I get you a good answer than make bad guesses.
Right. Excellent. So,
there's a good question.
Yes, go
ahead. In this example, why are there no quotation marks around the last values?
Okay, so when it comes to numerics or numbers, you don't have to put quotes. You can put quotes, but it's generally done without quotes, which implies that it's a number and it's to be evaluated as a number. When it comes to JSON, and I'll just see if I can get this screen popped up here. This is the official list of the different formats of the string data or of the data that you can contain and what they are. We've seen 2 types so far. We've seen string, which are always in quotes, representing words typically. Then you have number, which don't need to be in quotes, and those are, again, assumed as a number. Not unlike how we create a text field versus a number field. They behave a little differently. The number field is expecting a number, and it's treated that way. We can calculate based on that. So JSON is similar in that way, and that answers the question why there's no quotes. But just as a point of reference, we also have objects, entire objects. I guess we have seen an example of that. This would be an array with an object in it. And then we have arrays. We did talk about that. Then we have Boolean, and then null, and then raw. That doesn't necessarily apply here, but these are the different formats that the JSON functions in Claris support. Okay.
All right, 2 more questions. One,
Sure.
I think previous example, there was a quote that it was where the question about the quotes was.
Oh, it wasn't that one that I was showing?
Yeah.
Was it this one maybe?
Was it this one?
This one has quotes.
Not sure. Oh, it was the contact one, maybe. It might just be a typo also.
It could be.
Oh, go back. I think that was the one.
See quotes there that I can see.
Everything looks right to me in my quick scan.
Yeah, well, if it comes up again, we can go back possibly.
And then another question about spaces. You mentioned no spaces, and do the spaces after colon and comma make a difference?
No. So you can't put spaces. Well, you don't want to use spaces inside the key or the value unless you intend to have spaces in the key or the value. You can put as many spaces as you want between the other characters. So that's why JSON can be formatted in this way. As an example, here's our curly brace with a carriage return. That's optional, but it won't matter. The JSON parser on the other end is going to ignore those characters, but it will definitely not ignore those characters here in the key or in the value. That will mean something. So yeah, you can put as many spaces as you want before or after the colon, just not within the key itself or the value itself. And I think that goes for arrays too, between commas and arrays. It won't matter.
And I think we've identified the quote question is it looks like you started the contact on this slide with a curly quote.
Yes, that's a typo. That you cannot and should not use any curly quotes whatsoever anywhere in JSON. It will not accept that. It's bad karma. Don't be using any kind of curly. Yes, thank you. Good eye. All right, let's see. So now look at how many different places that FileMaker is already taking advantage of JSON. These are script steps that use JSON. We have insert from URL. When you receive JSON from a particular query of an API, you are most likely going to get JSON back. And when you construct your insert from URL, oftentimes you'll put some curl language in there, and oftentimes that data will be in the format of JSON. So that's definitely a thing. The execute FileMaker data API script step is nothing but JSON. It requires JSON going in, and you'll get JSON coming back. So the request and the response is all JSON. Triggering Claris Connect flow has an optional area for entering JSON. Then we have the machine learning script step, configure NFC, optional JSON there. The set AI call logging, although that particular script step doesn't require JSON anywhere when you construct it, the log that's created is formatted in JSON. Perform JavaScript function in web viewer. Most likely, if you're doing any kind of JavaScript data exchange between FileMaker and a web viewer, you're likely going to construct that in the format of JSON. And then, of course, the on-window transaction script trigger will give you some JSON return text when it executes. So those are the script steps. And then, but look how many functions now take advantage of JSON in and around the Claris platform. Obviously, all the JSON functions will use JSON, but other things like get installed FM plugins as JSON, get live text as JSON, then the machine learning get model attributes, the compute model, get layout object owner info. That's a neat. In fact, this is a great way to experiment with JSON. Just call that function from FileMaker. You'll get a bunch of JSON back, try to parse it, and that'll be a good way to start, actually. Get add-on info, get table DDL, get file local elements, and get system local elements. Those two last functions there are really cool functions that'll give you some environmental variables so you can see exactly what the user is using for their language, their computer setup, all of that. And it's all formatted in JSON, and it's a great way to start and get your feet wet. So those are the functions. And then as a platform, when you think about the entire Claris platform, these are the things that will require JSON knowledge. And that is FileMaker Data API, kind of goes without saying, but that is JSON going in, JSON coming back.
Yeah.
The admin API, the same thing.
I'll just add there that there's a good conversation in the chat, just that getting started with JSON, starting with the FileMaker Data API is a good place to start because it can be very simple, and then you can branch out and get really nested and complex over time as you learn and gain confidence.
Absolutely. That's a great way to start because you'll get all the benefits of understanding how to query your own file using JSON without the complexities of the authentication, the token management, the session management, and all the other things that go along when you typically work with the FileMaker Data API when it's served from FileMaker server. So yeah, great point. Highly recommend that. In fact, that's how I start a lot of the courses. We start with that example because it's easy to get your head around, or easier. Claris Connect itself, you can work with JSON. You can choose to have JSON come back to you, but certainly if you're going to work with custom connectors, then you will, those are all constructed as JSON formatted texts. FileMaker add-ons, which we've seen. If you're going to make an add-on or work with an add-on, especially one that works with JavaScript and the web viewer, then those will most likely be using JSON. And most other options that people use JSON for is when we're logging things and archiving things. I think it was mentioned by somebody in the community that sometimes they just capture their record in FileMaker and sort of store it as a JSON object and put that in another field. So now you have the whole record beautifully represented as one packet in a single field if you wanted everything in that record, in a sense, concatenated together. Just put it as a JSON object in a single field and call it the record. Then we have script parameters. And that actually dovetails right into the next part of our presentation here, which is the demo with Rosemary.
All right.
So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over the baton.
Okay, and I am going to open FileMaker. And I'll just add that we do have this demo file available, or it's not available yet, but I will be getting it hosted for download probably later today. So if you watch the community thread about this episode, I will drop that into chat. And I guess Mark and Angie, you guys are going to have to watch the chat now because when I'm sharing my screen, I can't also watch the chat. So
yeah, and I'll be watching your screen, walking you through this. So maybe
yeah,
we'll lean on Angie for that.
You got it. That's what
Okay.
I'm here for.
Excellent.
All right. So question I just saw flash up is what version of FileMaker does the demo use? I am running FileMaker 2024. Mark, do you want to give a insight on which version is required?
I believe this one requires version. I think you'll be okay with 2023 or above. Actually, yes, with this demo, you'll be good with 2023 or above. The reason for that little question mark there is there was a calculation on that layout that is referencing a field that I changed the name of the last minute and didn't realize. So,
Oh.
but I can walk us through that file if we have time, because it's a great example of what a basic API integration looks like, and we can look at the JSON as part of that. But for your example, Rosemary,
Yeah.
maybe we can really go for broke here and start with a brand new file, and
All
just to show
right.
people, right at the fly without
Okay. So
any
we're
net
just
whatsoever. Yeah, brand new file, blank file.
create a brand new blank file.
There you go.
All right, we'll call this JSON demo, and
Sure.
I'm going to put it on my desktop. All right.
All right, so let's create. I think we should create 3 fields. 4
right.
fields. Let's create 4 fields. Let's create a company field. Let's create a first, a last, and a year, maybe representing the year that that company was founded, but make that a number. Exactly.
right.
Perfect. You're
Okay.
reading my mind. Oh, you have to save the year
Oh,
first.
fine. Oh, wait, what did I just do? Cancel.
It, yeah.
Just in
Here. Oh,
case
I
Okay.
have to create it.
There
Yep,
you go.
there I go. Okay.
in case anyone is new to WebEx, if these screens are too small for you, you can zoom in on the screen to see the copy.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so we have our fields. So one thing that developers have really adopted as a great way to get started, maybe you're not ready to go full API integration yet, but you might want to learn JSON and do some basic things. And that is to set a series of script parameters, or set a script parameter with a series of fields that you might want to use somewhere else in your system. As an example, let's say I had a contact here with those 4 fields, and I wanted to capture that in a script parameter and send it somewhere, either as a new record somewhere or what have you. What we'll do in this example is we'll have Rosemary create the JSON representing those fields, and we'll present it in a custom dialog box. And then I'll have her parse that information back to the custom dialog box. So sort of a round trip on this as a great way to see how this works.
All right. Do I need data in these fields?
You do. Yeah, you want to
All
put
right.
some data, some meaningful data.
All right, we'll say Rosemary, and I'll just do this. And we'll pick the year I started working for Claris
Excellent.
FileMaker there, which isn't the company founding year, but
Right.
all right.
Now, when you're first getting started, it's infinitely more easy to work with the data viewer when you're doing your first
right.
JSON creation rather than trying to do it in a script itself. Yes, perfect.
All
All right.
right.
Now we'll go to the watch window.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And we'll,
Wow.
yeah,
I
you can
can
remove
probably get
those
rid of
or yeah,
those.
yeah, there you go.
All right.
Now we'll create a new expression. Perfect. Okay. So when you're working with any of the JSON functions, you probably don't know them at first. So you definitely refer to the help and you can kind of get a lay of the land of what they're all about. But if you just start typing JSON or what Rosemary's doing there, she's filtering the list on the right, that's fine. We are setting JSON. There's really only one main feature for that. So it's set element.
That one. Yep. Okay.
Okay. So now this breaks down to 4 parameters, 4 individual things that we have to set. We have the JSON, the key or index or path, the value, and the type. So this is a simple example. In this first parameter, JSON, this would allow us to specify existing JSON that we want to either add to or deduct from or to reference in some way. But we're starting brand new, so we can just put quote, quote there.
Okay.
Technically speaking, a more formal way to do that would be to put curly brace on the left, curly brace on the right. And then that indicates to the function that we want an object versus an array. But for now, just quote, quote, it defaults to object. All right, the next thing is the actual key, the first key. So that'll be, in our world, that's the field name. So you can name this anything you want, but you might want to name it something that relates to the actual field.
Right.
Perfect. Okay, now the value, that's pretty straightforward. That's the actual data. So we are getting it from FileMaker itself. Perfect. And then the type, this is also pretty straightforward. Just type JSON string, all in one word, not in quotes. It's a reserved word, and it doesn't matter whether it's cap or not, it'll fix itself. And there you go. You've just created your first JSON object with a key and a value, your first key value pair. There it is. It was that simple. Now that represents the first field. So we are working with a script parameter and we want multiple fields. So now we can add to this using something that we're familiar with. So what you want to do, Rosemary, is put a carriage return right after the first semicolon. Yes, right there. Put a carriage return. So that breaks it, and put another carriage return just for good measure. Put 3 spaces just to make it more readable. Okay, and then put a left straight bracket.
Left straight bracket.
Yep.
Oh.
The straight one.
That
There
one.
you go.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And then on the other side, put a right straight bracket.
Okay.
So you're gonna, yeah.
There
you go. Now put a comma. Okay, now copy that whole line.
All right.
Perfect. I like how you used the triple click on that. That was
Yeah.
really clever. Paste. All right. Now remove that last comma and then put a couple of carriage returns
Yeah.
and a right parenthesis to close the whole function.
So now it's a valid function.
Yes. And let's see what we've got here. Okay. So we want to change company to the next field name.
All right.
And we want to change that to,
Yeah.
yeah. And that is still a string. And let's see. Okay, we got to do one thing though. The right parenthesis on that first line needs to be removed. So no, not that first line. I mean the second line.
Oh, this
Yeah,
one.
that's what I meant. Remove that one and remove the one after it. Right. There we go. So that's what that's really how easy it is to do two fields in a single function like that. Okay, now copy that first line again, or that one, that's fine.
Yeah.
And do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and do the other. Yeah, exactly. Your
right.
instincts are kicking in there.
And then
Exactly. Yeah, see if you can do this without my prompting.
last. All right, and that's still a string, and then year. Here, and then this needs to be, oh, actually, you know, I'm going to leave it a string first and point out something.
Right. Good idea.
So here, because we
Yes.
have it indicated as a string, we're getting the year in quotation marks.
Correct. It's taking you literally. It's going to put that in a string. So it's thinking that that number is not a numeric, but rather a string value. So yeah, now go ahead and change it. Perfect.
All right.
Okay, so now what we see here is unformatted JSON. This is sometimes known as minified, which means that every space and carriage return has been completely removed, and we have just the pure JSON in its tightest form. This is a great way to send it to someplace and retrieve it because there's less characters. So if you're thinking about characters and performance and all of that, you definitely want your JSON minified if possible. But we're going to introduce now a new function here, which will format it a little better. So go ahead and put some carriage returns at the very top. We'll introduce a new function at the very top of this. Still put in your JSON to get your quick type to work. And then notice, and then JSONF, and you'll get right to the right function.
There it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that is your JSON format elements. And then you can make it so that your formula below is encapsulated in that exactly. Yeah, your instincts are good. And you are right paren on that. And now we have what we know as, sometimes this is called pretty format. It's readable, it's human readable, it's organized, it's nice and neat. It's nearly impossible to work with complex JSON without it being formatted like this. It's just too hard to read. So this is where us humans, we need it formatted like this. And wow, it's so easy now. You can see, oh, I've got a company, first, year, and first, last, and year. And you can see the years and number as well. So that's our JSON. Let's go ahead and copy that whole formula.
All right.
Okay, and we'll have that on our clipboard for a few minutes later here, and then cancel out of there, or just click monitor so we have it. Yeah, we don't want to lose that necessarily. Let's create a new script.
All right. Let's pop this over here, and oh, wow. Not used to seeing files with no scripts.
Yes, it is a foreign object. Yes, a foreign body.
All
you could call it test or whatever.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to do a single.
There's a question for Mark real quick.
Yes.
When setting the JSON format, if there's a calc field, will that also wait to finish the calc first before making the JSON?
I think the question is like, it's almost like an order of operations. Will it do the calculation and evaluate that before it formats it? I think it depends on how you construct it, but the way we constructed it is, I believe it'll do the internal part of here's the JSON and then format it after the fact, because the JSON is the outer layer of that the JSON function that we put in there. I think that's the question, and I hope that's the answer that you're looking for. If not, clarify. All right, so do a show custom dialog.
All right.
Okay, and let's edit that and get in there. You can leave the title anything you want or blank. Yeah,
All right.
that's fine. And then for the message, let's click on specify so we get into our calculation engine. And then just put in get left paren and SP for script parameter.
Okay.
And we'll leave it at that. This will be just an example of what we're going to get. So now if we look at the script parameter in its raw form, and you can push OK there.
All right.
And then now we have a script. Let's assign a button to it so we can kind of do a script parameter against that button.
Save that script.
Yeah, save that script.
All right, right here.
Go.
Make a button. All right.
Perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then we'll perform a script.
Yep. There's our script. And our parameter is, I assume, that.
You assume correctly. That's right.
All right.
Place that. Push OK. And yeah, and if you want your button to look more like a button, click on the right side. Click on the paint palette icon.
Yeah.
Or sorry, the one to the left of it, the styles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then go to primary. This is what I use just to make it a quick button that looks like a button.
Got it.
And, you know,
Good tip.
all right. Yeah, it's a little tip there for beginning files. All right, go to browse mode and we'll give it a test.
All right.
So what we have here, yeah, go ahead and expand your dialog a little. Yeah, perfect. So what we have here is we've got the formatted JSON perfect, and it's showing up as a script parameter in its raw form. But you don't necessarily want to communicate in this way. You'd probably want to have it a little bit more formatted, or at least more readable from a human standpoint. So let's push OK, and we'll now parse that JSON. But before we do, we want to put the JSON in a place that we can get to it and do the parsing in data viewer. So we need this in the data viewer. So let's go back to see what's the best way to do this. Let's go ahead and make a new field on in our system and call it JSON. There you go. Push OK. And then we will paste completed JSON.
Okay, hold on.
We need the results of the JSON though. So what you want, you don't want the form. So go back to your watch window when you go ahead and put it on your layout.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. Where is it? Oh, I'm just not finding it because.
perfect. And then make it bigger. Exactly.
All right.
All right. Double click the watch window.
Yeah.
And then copy just the bottom part, which is the actual JSON format. Yeah. Okay. Copy that. And then we'll go back and browse mode and paste it in there.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we've got workable JSON in a place that we can easily get to it in a way that we can see it, we can edit it on all that. So now we'll go back into data viewer, create a new expression. And you might want to put your screen, maybe hide the right icon, so you can see both the JSON and maybe.
That work?
Yeah, that'll work. That'll work.
Okay.
Okay, so now it's time to parse the JSON. And for that, we have a whole series of functions as well. So go ahead and put JSON. And we can, let's do this. Let's list the keys. This is a good way to start. It gets you oriented around the JSON you're looking at. It only has two parameters. It needs to know the JSON we're looking at. So that first parameter is going to be the field in FileMaker, which is where we're temporarily storing our complete. Yep. And then here, just put quote, quote. And that'll look at the root level of the JSON. And there's your keys. So it knows right away, those are the keys we're dealing with.
Okay.
Now, keep that same function and change the word keys to values.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, right. And no, those are our values as a list, mind you. And this can be very, very handy when it's time to count the keys or to count the values. You can kind of know, okay, how many keys are we dealing with? How many records are we dealing with? And it becomes very helpful functions. Yeah, there you go. It would be probably count value or value count.
Oh, right. Value.
Yeah. Yeah, count is when we use, yeah, there you go, value count.
There it
Look
is.
at that, 4. So what you've just seen is what we do over and over and over again when it comes time to working with JSON and parsing JSON and dealing with all of this. So now let's extract each one of these fields one by one. So erase everything you have and start with a JSON again. And this time you want to get element, kind of the opposite of set. You're going to get. The get's even easier because it's only got 2 parameters, your JSON itself and the key value, or the key, yeah, just put in quote, quote. So what this does is sort of give you the same thing back. It's the entire object. You really haven't gotten anything yet because you're at the root level. You haven't specified anything. So in order for it to extract something, you have to specify what you want it to extract. So if you pick any of those keys, you will get the value back. So the key is Claris, the key is company, the value is Claris. Right, exactly.
That's if I type.
Right.
Yep.
So you would use a combination of these get elements when you're pulling data from a JSON payload and presenting that in a set field, as an example. If you wanted to combine it in a complex statement where you put, as an example, Rosemary, why don't you go ahead and put the word first, like hard code. Yeah, you're about to.
Yep.
So, yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. So put in before the JSON get element, just put quote first space,
Ah.
yeah, like you're going to label it by hand. Right. Put a space there and then an ampersand.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's how you'd format that. And then if you wanted that to show up in a row, you would just simply use an ampersand and a carriage return, and you would do the first, the company, the last, and so forth.
Yep.
So that's it. You've just seen. Now, this is not everything you can do with JSON. There's arrays we didn't talk about, and there's nested objects and all of that. But this is a really simple way to get started with something like a script parameter.
All right.
So looks like we're at 15 minutes before the end. We can either open it up to questions or take another 5 minutes, and I'll walk through a couple of demos.
What do we want to do? Well, why don't we why don't you walk through the API examples, just because I think this is a good
way to do it. Yep.
Just a good example of what's there, and then we can.
Yep, exactly.
I'm going to let Angie open the last poll, and then, yeah.
Okay, great. So here's the demo. And let me just look at this first one here because it's kind of fun. And I just want to show you, this is an API called Ageify. It's just a fun API. It doesn't require an API key. It doesn't require a paid account. Doesn't require a login. So it's really simple. Every one of these examples is a simple way. This is how you would call it. You would just use this root URL. Then you specify the name. And in this case, I'm also specifying the country. And if I want to see the first name Mary in the US, this will calculate Mary, all the Marys that it has in its system, and the average age of people named Mary. And it shows that it's counting 30,921 names in their system that people named Mary. You can change it to anything you want. I'll just put in Mark here. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily trust that. Huh? Turns out I am 55 years old. So that's pretty darn accurate. It became a lot more accurate once you add the country. If you don't add the country, or if you use a country, outside of it could change. It will change the results. But let me just show you under the hood how that works and how easy this is to get started. Here's the entire script. And in fact, some of this is not even necessary. I'm setting the base URL to api.ageify.io, and then I'm putting in placeholders for name and a placeholder for country. Then I set a variable called final URL, and I'm just using a simple substitute command and substituting the country from the FileMaker file and the name. then this is really where all the magic happens. It's this one script step called insert from URL. We're saying that the return results will go in a variable called results. And we're saying this is the final URL. It's really nothing outside our normal FileMaker day-to-day stuff to make this work. And then I'm setting the count value. And then I show the dialog with the formatted in a way that says, here's the years and here's the results. And then a quick error trapping. If nothing is found, then show none found. So like most of this, half of this is just the formality of writing a normal script. The real magic is in these 3 or 4 script steps. And I didn't even have to do this. I could have just hard coded the whole URL and it would be a single script step. So that's an example there.
All right, and I've got another example if you want to just do something on the fly, probably in
Okay.
the data viewer, and that is a question about how do we use the new JSON make array function?
Right. So the make array function is going to make an array out of values that you have. So let me get back in here just to open it up. Turns out I wasn't even in advanced mode on this. Okay, so data viewer. So that would be if you had a bunch of values.
All right, we are not seeing your data viewer.
Oh, that's because I closed it.
Okay, yeah. Got it.
Right. Let's create some values. I think I'll just create a quick test. Okay. And I will get the test field here, put some values in here. All right, so 1, 2, 3. And I believe it's this simple. Go to data viewer, go to the watch, and we'll do JSON make array. Here it is. It's looking for a list of values, so I'll pull that from my test. Then it's asking me to create a separator. So I'll create a comma as my separator. And the type is going to be JSON string, just like we've been working with the entire time. And there it is. So let me just you could see the result here. So what it's done is it's encapsulated the values inside some straight brackets, making it an official array. And it's also indicated there's return markers in the values. Let me just change something here and make it, how do I want to do this? Let's see if I do this, how it's going to interpret that. Yeah. So if you had commas in your values already, which in a lot of times we ask our users to enter the data and separate with commas, this would be another way to have that interpret it. So now you've got an official JSON array, and these are quotes. So because I'm using numbers, I should have actually done this, JSON number. So that would be this is a newer function. I think it was 2024 that released this. And it makes it a little easier to make these arrays when you have data, like you mentioned, either in a repeating field or even in a related table. And that's how that works. It's another convenience measure. There's other convenient measures too when we're working with arrays that were introduced in 2024, the plus symbol and the colon symbol when we iterate over our item number in an array. So we've got examples of all that in the free JSON course that we have at Productive Computing University. And we're taking advantage of all that latest stuff. What other questions you got?
I'm trying to scroll back through. The other thing is I'm dropping in chat 3 Claris Engage in DevCon sessions from actually some of them go back as far as 2017, all that are introduction to JSON and uses of JSON. This is as you can see, we've been talking about it as a core skill for developers for many years. Yeah, I think I'm not seeing, going back through the questions.
Okay.
There's a question in Q&A. How many records can be in a single payload?
It depends on what context you're talking about. In the context of a script parameter, I believe the actual limit is 1 million characters in a script parameter. So that's a lot. When it comes to, let's say, working with AI platforms, your limitation on your payload will be the token limit. So you don't want to exceed the token limit. So I would say 1 million characters or less is a good rule of thumb when you're working in FileMaker. Anything bigger than that, a couple things happen. One, you start realizing that it's not going to work, and two, it starts getting either slow or impractical. So oftentimes, in fact, APIs are famous for this. They don't let you pull large payloads. They what's called paginate it. They give you chunks of data at a time. Sometimes it's 100 records, sometimes it's 20 records, to keep things neat and tidy and appropriately scaled. As an example, the FileMaker data API has a default value return of 100 records. So when you call that, it will, in fact, that's a great little segue here. I can show you just how easy it is to work with the FileMaker execute data API script step. Now that you know the JSON functions you've just seen, this is trivial. Let me just show you this. I think we have time. So execute data API. So this is a script step that's really underrated. And it's called execute FileMaker data API. It's really one question or two questions. One, where do you want your results to go? So we'll put the results in $results and a blank field for creating JSON. But to do a basic query, all you need to know is the layout name. And I don't actually know the layout name of mine. So let me just do JSON set element. And we need nothing to start with. What's our key going to be? The key is going to be the keyword called layouts. This is the keyword. The keyword, you'll find this in the FileMaker help on this function. The value is going to be the layout name. So let me just say main. I'm not sure what it's called. And then we need to just make sure it's JSON string. Okay, so that's what we're going to set there. And let me just double check. All right, the layout name is called main with a capital M, and it is case sensitive when working with keys in JSON. So now when I execute this and I go to data viewer and I look at the results from that function, this is the JSON it just returned to me in my own file. And it's going to the main layout and grabbing all the data on that layout, the fields and anything from any of the tabs. Of course, I didn't format it yet, so that would be sort of the coup de grace. If I were to format this as my second script step, I'll just do a set variable and JSON. No, we just need results, $results, and just one other JSON format and $results. There we go. Okay, now watch how slick this looks. All right, so here's, in a sense, the data from that main layout. I only have one record, so it's only showing me one record, but if I had 20 records in here, just pull it. So this is a great way for developers to extract data from their system programmatically without introducing the usual dance of having to go to a layout, manage a window, come back to the layout, do this, that. All of this is there, and you can just parse it as needed. So it's a neat and flexible way to work with FileMaker. It's not necessarily 100% required, but it is a nice introduction to a different way of thinking about how to program in FileMaker. And recently in 2024, the version 2024 of Claris, they introduced the idea of adding, editing, deleting, duplicating data, where before you could only read the data, now you can do all those things.
All right, so just as we have a minute left, a
Yes.
couple quick things. So first, Marc, you were going to give people homework.
Yes.
So
My homework to you is, in order to best parse JSON and to learn how to create JSON and parse it, is spend the next 5 days, 15, 20 minutes in the morning to come up with a JSON that you want to recreate and recreate it with your own two hands using functions like you saw Rosemary do. Just create the JSON and get it under your fingertips, get it in your brain. It just takes like 5 days in a row because if you don't use it, you will lose it. That would be the homework, and a great way of doing that. You can use AI to construct JSON, and there's also a great example in FileMaker called what I call the bakery example. You'll find it in the help files, and it looks like this. And it's just a great example that the team at Claris created. It's called Example JSON Data. You'll find it under the Working with JSON Functions help in the Claris. So do that and try to construct this with your own two hands in a single call. And if you can do that, then you've got a good handle on how to create JSON from scratch.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And I think as Angie has said, we'll be talking to Bob Bowers about script transactions and taking better control of transactions well in your FileMaker scripts on our next session. And then on October 3rd, we're going to have Edward Lee, who's the product manager for Claris Connect, and Kay Waldhauser to give some real world use cases of high value integrations that customers are using with Claris Connect. So I hope to see you for those two sessions coming up. And thank you very much, Marc, for the tutorial. I'm seeing lots of love in thank yous in the chat.
Excellent.
So yes, now I feel like I need to go off and do the homework for the next week as well. So talk to you all soon. Take care.
Thank you.